Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar here at Employflex. We're delighted to have you join us this year on our webinar, Imposter Syndrome. We are Employflex. We started off as Employ Mum over 5 years ago, and since then we've been at the forefront of the flexible work revolution since then. We specialise in flexible work and particularly in flexible recruitment, and that could be part-time, job share, it could be remote work, which is very popular at the moment, obviously, compressed hours, annualized hours, term time, or a mix of the above. We also advocate for a level playing field in the workplace, which flexibility can offer, and that nobody feels that they need to leave the workplace and everyone can continue with their careers. We know from all our candidates who contact us, literally crying out for flexible work, that this is not the case as it stands at the moment. So in a way, our values align with our guests today. We want people to be happy at work, and we know that one of the practical ways that employers can achieve this is by offering flexibility in the workplace. So our guest today is Aoife O'Brien. Aoife is an amazing lady. She comes with lots of experience to this webinar today. She set up Happier at Work in 2019 to make the world a happier place, one workplace at a time. I love that. Happier workplaces experience higher productivity, increased motivation, superior performance, and lower attrition. So Aoife has 20+ years of identifying and solving business problems for global organizations such as Unilever, Mars, Coca-Cola, and Kraft Heinz. She also has an MSc in Work and Organizational Behavior from Dublin City University, and is also a member of CIPD. Her podcast, which I'd recommend to everybody, it's fascinating, has had over 20,000 listens. And she interviews inspiring people who want to make the working world a better place. So Aoife is going to talk about one of our pet subjects today, which is imposter syndrome. And we here at Employflex and Employ Mum hear a lot about imposter syndrome from many of the candidates who contact us who have been out of work for a while, or they just have lost their mojo. So I know Aoife has spoken at length on this subject, so I'm really looking forward to this. And we'll go over to Aoife now. But just for a little bit of housekeeping, we're going to let Aoife run through her presentation. And if you have any questions or questions while she's going through her presentation, just pop them into the questions and answer box, which you can see at the bottom of your screen if you hover over it there. So yeah, so pop your questions in there and Aoife will answer them afterwards. So over to you, Aoife, and really looking forward to this afternoon.
Nearly forgot to unmute myself there. Thanks so much for the intro, Karen. Much appreciated. As Karen mentioned, I am talking about imposter syndrome today. So I suppose a little bit of background on me and my experience or talking about imposter syndrome. I have been talking about it quite extensively for the last couple of years now, and kind of quite by accident, and I am aware of the irony that oftentimes when we experience imposter syndrome, we kind of say, oh well, I just got lucky, or that wasn't really my achievement, but this is what happened. I was or a few people were asked to contribute to a magazine article in relation to their own experience of imposter syndrome. So I put myself forward and I said, oh, I've had imposter syndrome in the past, and shared some examples from my own career where I have experienced imposter syndrome. And fast forward a few months and it actually appeared in the Irish Times. I couldn't believe it, and got a lot of traction. And since then I've been talking about it quite a lot, doing various training sessions, speaking about it publicly, sharing knowledge on my LinkedIn. And I just love the feedback that I get from it as well, because it's something I think that never really goes away, that you're constantly managing it, but it's about being aware of what it is and being able to manage it. So I'm really delighted to be here today to be able to share my own experience and my own knowledge of it. Just to give you a little bit of background on me and my career, I worked in the fast-moving consumer goods market research industry for nearly 20 years. And in that, like, I was very much focused on data analytics, delivering presentations and managing client accounts, essentially. And it was something that I really, really loved until I reached a stage in my career where I thought there has to be a better way. I'd experienced some frustrations at work, let's say, and I thought there has to be a better way to do things. And so I left my corporate role around 3 years ago, and I set up my business 2 years ago, with the view, very much going back to what Karen had said, to create happier workplaces, but I wasn't really clear on what that vision was. So that has evolved over time, and now I have a few different facets to the business, if you like. I do speaking engagements and training. I also have a unique program called the Happier at Work program, which is currently targeted at businesses, but I'm looking to roll that out to individuals as well. I have a huge focus on women in leadership, and especially around this topic of imposter syndrome and how to help women to get to those more senior positions at work. And given my background in data and analytics, I also support HR with using their internal people data, or with cultivating surveys to, I suppose, to do a temperature check on how things are going, but then, what kind of actionable recommendations can we do to combat any of the people issues that we have in organizations. If anyone wants to connect with me, there are my various different handles. So you've got your Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to connect with me, absolutely feel free to do so. In terms of today, what I'm going to cover is, what is imposter syndrome? How does it show up? Who gets it? What we can do about it. And as Karen mentioned, there will be time then for questions at the end. So I would ask, if you have any questions as we go throughout the presentation, if you could add those into the Q&A box, and Karen will read those out at the end. And after the questions, then I have a final thought that I want to leave you with. And then I have some other ways that you might want to connect, and some further resources that you could potentially use as well in relation to imposter syndrome. So first of all, I want you to meet Jane. This is Jane, and outwardly Jane is confident. She's had a successful career to date. She's a busy mum. She's well educated, a high achiever, and she does well in most things. So this is the image that Jane projects of herself to the world. But inwardly, Jane is crumbling. Behind closed doors, Jane feels like she's not good enough. She feels like she's juggling too many things and she can't get anything right. She feels like she can't put herself forward for that big promotion at work because she doesn't think she really, really deserves it. And so this, I suppose, is a way of introducing what the imposter syndrome really looks like. So outwardly, people can present as really confident and they have a successful career as far as other people are concerned. They seem to be well educated. They have everything to get, they have everything together, and outwardly they appear as if nothing is wrong at all. And I suppose I want you to keep that in mind when you're thinking about yourself and in relation to other people as well. So what exactly is imposter syndrome? This is fundamental to what imposter syndrome is. So it's this thought that I am a fraud and I'm going to be found out. And the crucial part is that you believe that you're a fraud, but also that someone else, who is it that's going to find you out? But you are afraid that other people, whoever those other people might be, are going to find you out somehow. Everyone else knows much more than I do. So you can tend to compare yourself to other people, and you feel like you know this amount and other people know this amount. So you feel yourself kind of coming up short in relation to other people. You convince yourself, I don't have what it takes. And that could be, I don't have what it takes to do the project, to be promoted, to do the role that I'm currently in. And you have this overarching feeling of dread. Other people are going to realize that I'm not up to the job. So this is another kind of myth that we try and convince ourselves as well, that people are going to realize, they're going to find me out somehow. And this is a new one that I've come across, and I think it's particularly interesting as well, that the perception is that everyone thinks I know more than I do. So somehow you've managed to pull the wool over everyone else's eyes for years, and they think that you know more than what you think that you know. There are other ways that it shows up as well. So I'll run through some of those other ways. I don't deserve my achievements. I just got lucky. So that could be, you had a promotion or you've had a really successful career to date, but you just happen to be in the right place at the right time, or you happen to put yourself forward for an opportunity, or no one else went for that role. That's why I got it. So you convince yourself that you just got lucky and you're not really up to the job, but you just happen to be in the right place at the right time, and therefore you got it. I can't go for that promotion because I would never get it. I'm definitely not good enough. So you're holding yourself back in some way from going forward for whether it could be a promotion or a change of job or something like that. I knew I was going to fail. And this is a sneaky one, because this is the kind of thing. So you've convinced yourself that, oh, well, I'm going to fail anyway. So therefore you leave things till the last minute and you do a not very good job of it. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because you haven't put in the effort, then you don't get the outcome that you really deserve. And you put it all down to not being good enough, when in fact you haven't put in the effort in order to get the results that is required, because you've convinced yourself in advance that, well, I was going to mess the whole thing up anyway, so I may as well not even try. I have to work longer hours to compensate for being a fraud. And this can show up again in a few different ways. So it could be in a work context. It could be that you're running your own business as well. It could be in other aspects of your life as well, not necessarily work related. But this idea of having to work longer hours just to kind of prove to everyone else that you know what it is that you're doing, that you have everything together, that you're good enough to be doing that role. You feel like you need to convince other people in some way. I'm afraid to speak up in case people realize I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know what I'm talking about. And that could be something as simple as being in a team meeting and not sharing your ideas. It could be not speaking up to your boss when you have something important to say, or kind of not standing up for yourself as well. So I would love to know, and maybe pop it into the question box, do these ideas of what imposter syndrome is, like, what resonates most with you? How is imposter syndrome showing up for you? I'd love to know a little bit more about that. Moving on then to who actually gets imposter syndrome. And again, this is super interesting statistic. So 70% of people will suffer from imposter syndrome at some stage in their career. Like, to me, that is a phenomenal number. 70%, that's really, really high. And I always like to think, who is that other 30% that doesn't suffer from imposter syndrome, or will never suffer from imposter syndrome in their career? 70%, it's a huge number of people. And I deliberately said people because it's not just women that are impacted by imposter syndrome, it's men as well. So 70%, it's a huge number. And who are those other 30%? I really want to know, because I think if you're here today, you're definitely not in the 30%. You're most definitely in the 70%. But one thing to bear in mind is, if you're in that 70%, you're most definitely not alone. So oftentimes when we experience imposter syndrome, we convince ourselves that there is this thing called imposter syndrome, and I am aware of it, but I'm a real imposter because I don't know what I'm talking about, or I don't deserve my accomplishments, or this is my first time to do it, so I'm definitely an imposter. I'm not part of those 70%. I really am an imposter. But that's the imposter syndrome way of convincing you that you're an imposter, and that forms part of what it's all about as well. But just know that if you feel like you are an imposter, you are very much not alone. And oftentimes we feel like we're alone, but we're not. And I very deliberately, as I mentioned, said it's people. So it's men and women who suffer from imposter syndrome. And interestingly, when I talk about it on LinkedIn, it's oftentimes men who comment on my post and say, I didn't know that was a thing. I felt that way for years. I thought it was just me. Thank you so much for giving it a name. I'm really glad to know that I'm not alone. And I was so surprised with the number of men who either commented or reached out directly to me on my private messages on LinkedIn. Like, it's not just women who suffer. Men and women deal with it in very different ways. So women, for example, they might either hold themselves back from going for a promotion, or when they go for a promotion and they get it, they see a wider gap between what they perceive they should know and what they actually know, given that they're at that higher level now. Whereas men will go for the promotion anyway. I'm sure you've all seen the statistics where a woman has 9 out of 10 and a man has 6 out of 10, and he'll go for it no matter what. So if a man goes for it, then that becomes then reassurance that he did the right thing because he has received that promotion. Whereas a woman will see still a huge gap between where she thinks she is and where she thinks she should be based on her title. So really, really interesting, the difference in the approach there. Who gets it? So again, I'd love to know in the questions, or maybe just have a think about this. Like, oftentimes the perception is that when I become successful, and I use that term in inverted commas because success means different things to different people, when I become successful, I won't feel like an imposter anymore. And certainly I have some examples from my own career where there are people who I looked up to, and when you look at someone, you're like, wow, like, she totally deserves that role. And when I can't wait to get to that level, because I definitely won't feel like an imposter anymore. She looks like she's got everything going on and she's brilliant and she can do everything. And interestingly, when I left my corporate career, I met up with a former colleague for a coffee, and she said, oh, it's really interesting, Aoife, that you're talking so much about imposter syndrome, because actually I feel like I'm a total imposter. And from the outside, you would never, ever guess. And luckily, she was being mentored in her role, and I don't know whether she was necessarily open about having imposter syndrome, but she was certainly open about the feelings that she was experiencing, or getting that sense of reassurance of like that she's done the right thing and she's doing a good job, and all of that kind of stuff that's really, really important to help us to build up that sense of our self-esteem as well. I wanted to basically bust this. This is a myth that oftentimes you think, I'm going to get that promotion, or I'm going to get to that next level, or get that new job, and then I definitely won't feel like an imposter anymore because I'll feel like I deserve my accomplishments. That it's not that easy. It doesn't just go away like that, and it's something that needs to be managed over time as well. So who gets it? And there will be definitely some familiar faces among this list here. So you've got David Tennant, who was waiting and waiting while he played Doctor Who for the proverbial knock on the door to say, okay, thanks, David, you've had your fun, and now we're going to leave it to the real actors. He was just waiting for that knock on the door. Neil Armstrong, who showed up to a party, and in his own perception, the party was full of a whole load of really successful people. And why was he there? And he didn't deserve to be there because he just did what he was told. This is the first man on the moon. And he believed in his own estimations of what he did. He just did whatever NASA told him to do, as opposed to having this amazing accomplishment that deserves all of the success that he has. Michelle Obama speaks quite openly in her book all about her own experiences of imposter syndrome. Saoirse Ronan as well has been very open about it, as have the happy pair twins, Stephen and David. They talk about as their business grew, how they felt like they were imposters, and they were like they couldn't really believe it, and they had to pinch themselves, and they thought they must have just got really lucky or something. And Tom Hanks as well has been really open, and this is just a handful of the people who have openly spoken about their own experiences of imposter syndrome. And I suppose what I want to do with this is to illustrate, like, it's not something that's an exclusive club to be part of. Actually, a lot of people have suffered from imposter syndrome and will continue to suffer from imposter syndrome as well. It's very much on this theme of, if you feel like an imposter, you are definitely not alone. It's a part of the human condition, if you like. I want to talk now about the different types of imposter. So there are 5 different types of imposter, and I'll go through kind of a synopsis of them here, but I'll go into more detail about what that means then afterwards, before we go into talking a little bit more about what we can do to manage that, the sense of imposterism. And in terms of who gets it, so I'm sure there are some people in the room who can relate to this. The perfectionist is the first type of imposter, and I know that I can certainly relate to this, and I can share a very recent example as well. So the perfectionist is the kind of person who wants everything to be absolutely perfect, and mistakes are mistakes are absolutely terrible, and if they mess something up, or if they make some sort of mistake, then it's the end of the world, and they absolutely must be a total fraud, and they must be the imposter that they think they are. But an example of this kind of thing would be, so in the in putting this deck together, I've recently done a rebrand. So I wanted to make sure that all the fonts were right. So of course I had to go through each individual slide and make sure, just double check on all of the fonts. That's just who I am. And I prefer to flip the script on the perfectionism and talk about delivering excellence. So it's more about excellence than perfectionism for me now. But that is the kind of thing that a perfectionist does, let's say. And the second one then is the natural genius. And the natural genius is the person who always did really, really well at school. And they, things came quite naturally to them. Maybe they were good at English and maths and went on to go to college. And, everything that they've turned their hand to, it seems to come quite naturally to them and quite easily to them. The difficulty here is when a natural genius, when things are a little bit harder, or when you try a new skill or start a new job and things don't come as easily as you're used to, then it raises these feelings of being a total imposter, because something is actually difficult and you have to put in a little bit of effort in order to achieve it. The superhero then is the kind of person who does they want to be brilliant at absolutely everything. So, you could be sitting here going, okay, well, I'm really good at this, and this is my area of expertise. But Jenny over there, well, she's really good at marketing. I want to be really good at marketing as well. And there's this perception that if you're not brilliant at everything, that somehow you're a fraud, because you're comparing yourself to other people and what they're good at, and finding yourself falling short when you're not good at the same things that they're good at, even though they mightn't be good at what you're good at. And this can appear as well in other aspects of our life. So if you want to be a great mum and a great sister and a great daughter, and you want to be the kind of the best at everything, but you're spinning all the plates all at the same time, and it becomes very difficult to manage. And obviously you can't be brilliant at absolutely everything. The soloist then, this is the person who likes to do things on their own, and they won't ask for help, because if they get help, then the achievement is not their own. So the soloist is another interesting thing, and something I most definitely can relate to as well. And the soloist, even when help is offered to them, they often would turn it down, because of this idea or this concept that by accepting help, that whatever they achieve is actually, it's not really deserved, because they got help in getting that achievement. And then there is the expert. And the irony is here that the expert doesn't like to be called the expert, because they don't perceive themselves as an expert unless they have all the answers, unless they can, that they have all of the absolute knowledge in the world. And it's such an interesting thing because they need to know all of the answers. So you'll find this person kind of doing courses all the time and building their knowledge. I've noticed a couple of people raising their hands. There will be an opportunity to put in questions at the end, and Karen is going to ask me questions. So if you pop any questions that you have into the Q&A box, then we will get to them at the question section at the end. So looking first at the perfectionist and kind of doing a bit of a dive into each one of these different types of imposter now. So we've got the perfectionist first. And the kind of thing that goes on in the perfectionist head is mistakes are unacceptable. So if you make a mistake, if you fluff up your words in a presentation, for example, or if you have a typo, or if you make some sort of error in a relationship with someone, in your communication or something like that, the perception is that mistakes are absolutely unacceptable. And if you make a mistake, it must mean that you are a fraud and that you don't deserve the accomplishments that you've had, and you're a total and utter imposter. The other perception is that everything has to actually be perfect. So there's this level of perfectionism, and this idea of like everything has to be, and perfectionism doesn't exist, by the way. So this idea of having everything with totally no mistakes and totally flawless, and with everything being exactly perfect, then it's unachievable. And it kind of then becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy where it's like, well, everything has to be perfect. Well, everything can't be perfect. Oh, well, then I totally must be a total imposter and I'm not good enough. The kind of behaviors then that show up will be things like over planning. So planning things way more than what you actually need to do. So other things would be like over preparing. So doing more work than is required in advance of, it could be in advance of a particular presentation that you're delivering. And I'm only going back to my own career history where the kind of big projects we worked on were delivering presentations to clients. So if you apply that to whatever it is, whatever industry that you're in, and having to think about what that might mean for you. So over planning, over preparing, and here's another one, overthinking. So when you kind of over analyze stuff, then it could be an indication that you're a real perfectionist. And I'm sure like this one is pretty rife among the circles that I move in, most certainly. So I'd say there's a few people listening today who can absolutely relate to this perfectionist tendency or this perfectionist imposter type. The overarching thing then is like the perfectionist feels like a total failure when things don't go according to plan. And so they feel like a fraud or they feel like an imposter when things don't go according to the way, and the plan being that sense of perfection. Everything has to be absolutely 100% perfect. The second one then is the natural genius. And the natural genius then is the perception is that this should come easily to me because everything comes easily and naturally to me. And so if I try something new, then it really should come easily. But more than that, if it's hard, then it means that I'm a total fraud. So if I'm trying something and it's actually a little bit more difficult than I'm used to, then somehow I must be an imposter and I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it comes a little bit harder. And the perception also is that this actually should be effortless. It shouldn't require me to put in as much effort as I'm putting in. And if there's effort required in order to complete this task or in order to achieve this accomplishment or this achievement, then I must be a fraud. I'm fooling everyone because I'm actually not good enough to do it. The kind of behaviors then that show up for this natural genius would be that they are reluctant to try new things, because when they try new things, they're usually things that are out of the comfort zone. They're usually things that are a little bit more difficult because they haven't tried it before and it's new and maybe it's a bit hard. And so there's a maybe twofold approach to this. On the one hand, they can convince themselves that they're not good enough if something is a little bit more difficult to do, but also that if other people see that they're struggling to do something new, that they might find out that they're a total fraud or that they're an imposter, but don't tell anyone. And then they tend, therefore, to stick to what they're already good at. So they're not necessarily trying new things. They're just sticking with what they already know. And that can be a danger for businesses as well, when people stay in that sense, that kind of comfort zone. This imposter type feels like a failure when things are hard. So when things are more difficult than they think they should be, then this person thinks that they are a total failure or a total fraud. The superhero then, so this is the one that I mentioned, is they want to be able to do it all. And when I say do it all, that can apply to multiple facets of your life as well. So like I mentioned, I think being a great mom, a sister, a daughter, it could be being a great friend, and you're trying to spin all of these plates all at the same time. And the tendency here as well is to compare yourself to other people and to look at, like, Sarah over there, she's able to do everything. But what you see of Sarah is what Sarah chooses to share. And you might see a very one-sided approach to that, but you also might see only one area that you're comparing against as well. So maybe other parts of Sarah's life are just in a shambles and they're all falling apart. But that's not necessarily what you see. So this superhero thinks that they should be able to do it all. And they should be able to do it all easily as well. So it's not that it should be a struggle for me to try and manage all of these different competing priorities and competing achievements that I want to do. I should also be able to do it quite easily. And the superhero behaviors then, they tend to take on a lot of responsibility. So they might take on all of the responsibility. So it's the person who's kind of stepping up to say, well, I'll organize that, or I'll do this. And they want to be shown to be really, really good at everything and not letting the ball drop as well. They want to be good at everything and to be seen to be good at everything as well. So there's a big thing around this with the perception of other people. So being seen, and also for themselves, that they want to feel like they are really good at absolutely everything. The kind of way it might show up is that they're working on multiple projects simultaneously. So they could be putting their hand up for a few different types of projects and work because they want to be seen to be getting involved in everything, and they want to try their hand so that they can show to themselves and to other people that they are working on these multiple different types of projects and that they can do it all, essentially. The soloist then, so this is the person who thinks that they should be able to achieve what it is that they want to achieve without help. And if they get help, then the achievement is not their own. So it's a really interesting one. And as I mentioned at the start, when someone even offers them help, they will oftentimes turn it down because it's this perception that they've gotten help with what it is that they're trying to do, that it's somehow the achievement is not their own. And they must be a fraud, they must be a failure if they have to get outside help with anything. And that could really be anything. They're very reluctant not only to ask for help, but also to accept help. The kind of behaviours, this person prefers to go it alone and to achieve things on their own without actually getting any help from anyone else. They won't ask for help. So they're very reluctant to ask for help, even if they need it. They would much prefer to go things alone, to try and solve things themselves, even though someone else might be able to help them much, much more quickly, or someone else has a level of expertise that is really required on the project that they're working on, but they just continue to go it alone because they perceive that if they ask for help, that somehow it diminishes the achievement that they get because of the fact that they have gotten help. And the important thing here as well is that they won't accept help. They won't accept help that's offered to them. The last one then is the expert. So this is quite an interesting imposter type. the expert perceives that they should know all of this already. So if they're asked a question and they don't know the answer, then they must be a fraud, because they should know all of this. If they're being perceived as the expert, they must know all of this already. They must have all of the answers. The other interesting thing here, and the irony is, like, they don't like to be called the expert. They might have a level of expertise, but they don't like being called an expert, because that with being called an expert comes a lot of pressure to have all of the answers already, and they don't see it as a learning journey, and they don't see it as you reach a certain level of expertise and then suddenly there's new dimensions to whatever area it is that you're an expert in, and therefore you don't necessarily know that, and somehow then you're a fraud. So they don't like to be called the expert, because with that comes an awful lot of responsibility of having all of the answers, and this is in their own mind, in their perception. This is what's going on. And another thing is, like, you'll find the expert looking for just one more qualification. I just need to do this one more course, and I just need to do this, and there's always just one more, until they reach that. They, in their mind, if they keep doing these courses, then they are going to reach that level of expert. But again, similar to the perfectionism, you're never going to reach a level where you're like, oh yeah, now I'm totally an expert, because they're very reluctant to take on that in case they don't have all the answers, and they don't see it as this is an opportunity for me to learn something new or to find out something new about this specific area, but they feel they should have all the answers already. The kind of behaviors, like, the expert needs to know everything, whether that is they are asking a lot of questions, whether it is that they're just constantly seeking more and more knowledge. They consume an awful lot of content. So rather than sharing content or giving their own opinion, they're going to be reading a lot. Whether that's on online magazines or newspapers or on social media, just getting more and more information about specific topics. And you'll find them also constantly doing courses. So, just one more qualification, and trying to always up level so that they can keep up with that perception of being the expert and being the expert in that specific area. So these are the 5 different types, just to do a recap on them. So there's the perfectionist, the natural genius, the superhero, the soloist, and the expert. And hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of the complexity of imposter syndrome as well. But the one thing that all of these have in common is that people will think I'm a fraud if I don't kind of live up to those expectations. So if I don't get everything right, for example, as a perfectionist, then, well, other people are going to realise I'm a total fraud and I don't know what I'm talking about. So really, really interesting, those 5 different types of imposter. There are some positives associated with imposter syndrome as well, and I wanted to touch on those briefly before we go on to talk about the ways to manage and overcome imposter syndrome as well. So having imposter syndrome, you saw that 70% of people at some stage in their career will suffer from imposter syndrome. So it makes you more relatable. It makes you a little bit more human. You're able to relate to other people, because if 70% of people can relate to it, that they have either had it or will get it at some point, then it makes you a little bit more relatable to other people. Another interesting thing around imposter syndrome, because the other side of imposter syndrome is this thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And early on in the Dunning-Kruger effect is when you have a lot of confidence in your own abilities, but you don't actually have the competence. And, there are some people who immediately come to mind, who are well known in the public domain, who have overconfidence and undercompetence. But having imposter syndrome is the opposite of that, where you have a lot of competence, but you have a low level of confidence in your own abilities. But this gives you a sense of humility, and it actually makes you more relatable to other people. Peter Lencioni, in his book about teamwork, said that humility is actually one of the really important factors for having a good team and for a team to be able to work effectively together. So being humble. And the other two then, so hungry, humble, and smart. So hungry being having that drive within you for success. Humble then being, it's more than modesty. It's not bragging about your results, but it's having a sense of I'm only human and I make mistakes. And then smart is more around people smarts and emotional intelligence. It's really, really important for teamwork. The other thing that imposter syndrome can give you is the sense of vulnerability, which is really, really critical. And it makes you a little bit more authentic as well, because most people will have imposter syndrome at some stage. But if you can be authentic about your own experiences about it, then again, it ties into this idea of being more relatable to other people as well. So what can we do about it? I talk about this, and I've just summarized my own experiences into an easy to remember it's not even an acronym, an ABC essentially. So it's easy to remember your ABCs. And A is for acknowledge, B is for believe, and C is for call to action. So first of all, looking at A for acknowledge, what does that mean? It means thinking about what is the imposter saying? You know, what is that voice? What is it actually saying? And how do I put words into what is actually going on for me when the imposter is speaking? And is this true? Is it actually true what the imposter is saying? So questioning whether or not what the imposter is saying is actually true. You can also write down what your imposter says. So more than just thinking about, well, what is it saying and is it true? You can write down, you know, oh, well, my imposter says I'm not good enough, or I didn't deserve the promotion that I got, or whatever it might be. But actually getting it out onto paper really, really helps. Being aware of the fact, or acknowledging the fact that it's in your head. This is something, it's not something that's going on for other people. Imposter syndrome is not what other people think of you. It's what's going on for you inside your own head. And it's a voice that's happening in your head as well. And you have a choice as to whether or not you believe those thoughts that are happening in your head. So if you decide that you do choose to believe what the voice is saying, or if you decide you don't, you always do have that choice. So you can take action based on whether you think that what the voice is saying is true, or whether you think it's not true. Another really great thing that you can do is to, and you will have noticed me talking about like the imposter as if the imposter is separate. But if you give a name, it's much easier to dissociate yourself from these imposter feelings, from the imposter kind of thoughts and words that are going on in your head. I call my imposter, and I hope there's no one in the audience call this, I call my imposter Sandra, but I have heard of other people calling their imposter, like giving it kind of a well-known character. Like there's Mrs. Hannigan, for example, from Annie, the movie. And so just thinking about the imposter as a character that's separate to yourself. So it's like, oh, is that Mrs. Hannigan saying that again? Or, oh, is that you thinking now? Or is that Sandra doing the thinking? And are you getting in your own way? Or is Sandra trying to block you in some way? So just naming it can really, really make a difference as well. And that doesn't just apply to imposter syndrome. That applies to a few different things as well. The other part of acknowledge is to write down your achievements. So acknowledge what you've achieved to date, because I'm sure if you actually sat down, if you spent 5 minutes even thinking about all of the achievements that you've had to date and what are the kind of skills that were required in order to achieve what you've achieved. And those achievements don't have to just be work related. They can be personal achievements as well. And I remember back to a few years ago when I did my career coaching certificate, and this was one of the exercises, and it was thinking of all of the achievements that you've had. And you know, I was thinking back to like I've done things like I've traveled the world independently. And so what kind of skills are required in order to do that? Like that is not related to work at all. But the skills that I acquired, or the skills that I already had and was able to utilize in those situations that I had when I was traveling, are most definitely applicable to work life as well. So things like planning, things like communication, prioritization, connecting with other people, you know, all of those kind of things, they're really, really important. And if you can write those down and get them out, like, you'd be really surprised at how great you feel when you actually do that, when you write down what you've achieved and what skills are required in order to achieve what you have achieved. The other thing to consider as well is when you're thinking of your imposter syndrome, the focus is very much on me. You know, oh, I have imposter syndrome, therefore I can't do this or I can't do that. But if you shift that focus back to the people who are missing out because you're getting in your way with imposter syndrome. So think about whether it is your clients, it could be your colleagues, it could be some really great new ideas for the business or something like that. But don't put the emphasis on you, put the emphasis on who you could help by not having imposter syndrome. So shifting that focus to other people and who you can help by sharing your ideas, for example, by speaking up in a meeting, by going for a promotion, by dealing with a client on a big project or something like that. So it's not, your imposter syndrome is not about you. The second one then is believe. And in building on from the first section, when we thought about, well, writing down, like, what is the imposter actually saying? And if you can then take what you've written down and flip it, so turn it into something positive. So, for example, the imposter says, I'm not good enough. Okay, well, what specifically is that not good enough? And how can you turn that around? And being not good enough, turning it into a positive affirmation could be something simple like, I'm trying my best every day, or I'm learning new things every day, or I'm good enough just where I am now and I'm always getting better. So something that's positive, and it needs to be present focused, so it's true for now, but it can also be future focused of where the direction that you're going. Another thing, like, some people, and I know, you know, specific clients of mine as well, they really struggle with building up their own self-belief and build, you know, and recognizing and realizing their own achievements. And if you are struggling with that, get feedback. So, you know, it could be that you ask a friend. You don't have to say, oh, I have imposter syndrome, but you could do something as simple as asking friends, like, what are you really good at? You know, could you tell me, like, what do you think that I'm really good at that maybe other people are not so good at, or what makes me unique? You can also ask, you know, if you recently got a promotion, if you recently started a new job, like, what was the reason that I was selected? So this kind of banishes any ideas that it was because you were lucky or because there was no one else that went for it. They chose you because you were the best person for the job. So getting that kind of external feedback sometimes can be really, really beneficial as well. And then C is the call to action. And I would really like for everyone who's listening today to identify what is the first step that you individually need to take. What are you going to do differently as a result of listening to this webinar today? So identifying what that first step that you need to take is, and that step can be a small step, but it's personal to you. The other thing to bear in mind as well is, if you need help, you can ask for help. You can always ask for help from other people. So reach out to other people and don't be afraid to ask for help. And I know the soloists who are out there, they will be very reluctant to ask for help, or they'd be very reluctant to accept help if it's offered. And they might need to learn ways to overcome that, or ways to specifically ask for help for them. And also you can see it's a learning journey. So you might make mistakes along the way, but take that as an opportunity to learn. In my book, there's no such thing as failure. It's all about learning as you go along and building up that awareness and building up that knowledge and trying new things and then learning from what it is that you try to do. So what can we do about it? It all boils down to these three things. So acknowledge, believe, and call to action. So now we are ready for the question section. So we have a few minutes left, and so Karen, do you want to pop back on and let me know if there's any questions in the Q&A?
Yeah, I'm back on here now. Can you hear me?
I can, yes, thank you.
You can stop sharing your screen there. So Lovely. There was so much in that, Eve. Oh my God, I got so much, loads and loads of takeaways. And I think we can all identify with one of those 5 types that you mentioned. Yeah,
Definitely.
those, actually.
Yeah. And that tends to be like, it's not just like I'm one or the other. It does tend to be like, I certainly can relate to at least 2, if not 3 of those for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I loved the bit, when you were talking about what is imposter syndrome, somebody who just got lucky. And just is a word that we hear here.
Yeah, just yeah. I don't use that term at all anymore. I'm just following up. I'm just this. It diminishes what we're trying to do, what we're actually doing here. So if I catch myself using that word, I have to double check, is I'm just leaving the house, that's okay. I'm just following up, that's not okay.
Or I just did a PhD in
oh yeah. I just did it in my spare time. Yeah.
And like we find that a lot with women who contact with us,
Yeah.
they use this self-sabotaging vocabulary.
Oh, I have this little website that I did, or I have this little project that I'm working on. So there's loads of these diminishing words that as women in particular we tend to use to describe what it is that we're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And do you think it's kind of an Irish phenomenon, more so than other countries?
Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome, and almost like self-sabotaging yourself, saying, "Oh, that was nothing." Like I love dress. Oh, Penny's hun.
Penny's hun. Yeah. That's a really interesting question, and I do think in some ways, like culturally, we do have a tendency to be a little bit like that. I think imposter syndrome, more generally speaking, is a global concept or a global idea, but I think it's more so, like this. I mean, the other thing is the Irish concept of notions, and who does she think she is? Exactly. Putting her head above the parapet, who does she think she is? And in Australia, I lived in Australia for a while, they have this thing, they call it the tall poppy syndrome. So if you're a tall poppy and you're taller than the other poppies, they're going to cut you down to size, I don't think it's uniquely Irish, but I think Irish people in particular, we definitely do have a tendency to be a little bit like, oh, who does she think she is as well? So therefore, you don't want to put yourself forward, or you don't want to go for those opportunities because you have this fear of judgment. I'm not sure how related that is to imposter syndrome as such, but we certainly do have those kind of attitudes here in Ireland.
Yeah, and downplaying your achievements, I suppose.
Yeah,
I don't know if that is even wrapped up with imposter syndrome, but it's kind of like I have done all these things, I can't actually say it out loud and be proud of it or boastful of it. Like an American will come in and tell you all about them, how fantastic they are, whereas the Irish person beside them might be just as qualified, but won't say anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think while we're working remotely as well, I think imposter syndrome is going to be challenging. That being afraid to speak up, and not having the confidence to say, that is going to be something that managers need to have a good think about when they're managing people, to make sure that those people with imposter syndrome are being heard.
Yeah, absolutely. But be aware of it, and as a manager, give positive, reassuring feedback to people. I'm currently listening to a book all about feedback, and I have delivered courses as well on feedback. It's an area I'm hugely interested in. Karen, I think it's it has these associations as like, oh, feedback. I definitely don't want to hear feedback. Or you get brought into a room to get given feedback, and you're afraid that you're going to be fired or something, So it has all of these associations with it, but actually feedback should be seen as a gift, and it should be seen as positive reinforcement of like, you're actually doing a really great job, and for people being proactive about delivering that feedback and saying, you're doing a really great job. And I know I, as a manager, have made that mistake where not just once, on 2 occasions, where someone, one of my staff members approached me and said, can you just let me know how I'm getting on, you know? And I thought they were doing a phenomenal job, like brilliant. But you assume that other people know that they're doing a great job, but they don't necessarily know. So you have to be proactive with giving your feedback as well. That was a really valuable lesson for me, certainly when I was managing people.
Yeah, yeah, very important. I think in the world where the working world we're living at the moment.
Definitely.
Okay, look, I'm going to pop into the questions here now and see what's there.
And I do have a couple of more slides to share after the questions, just in terms
Okay.
of managing time. Yeah.
Okay, just keep an eye on the time. Yeah, so we've got about 6 minutes left. So we'll quickly go through these questions here. So I've gone a little bit backwards during COVID and tend to hide behind emails more than ever. Any tips to get over this hump?
Yeah, I think COVID has been a huge thing because you're not seeing people face to face. It's really hard to build that sense of connection. I think, like, one of the things is, well, if you've acknowledged it for what it is, like, is it imposter syndrome, and therefore how can you, you know, what kind of steps do you need to take in order to overcome that? So if it's hiding away from or hiding behind emails, what might be the first step for you? Like, does it look like something like a small transition to maybe instead of one email that you have one phone call once a week, and then the others can be emails, and then slowly building it back up to having phone conversations, because it's so easy to get lost and kind of get hidden away because of the pandemic, because you're not seeing other people. If you're hiding behind emails, is there an opportunity to ask for that feedback to, you know, and what's the reason for hiding behind emails as well? So can you get that feedback from your manager or from some of your peers, or even from some of your friends, you know, and to start building up that sense of self-confidence as well. But at least you've acknowledged, first of all, that it is imposter syndrome. You're like, I feel like a total imposter, and it definitely has been exacerbated by the pandemic. So you're most certainly not alone in feeling that way.
Absolutely, yeah. Quickly, I think there's an echo from on my side. I don't know what that's about, but I'm in a more traditional government department where a majority of my peers are in senior management or male. I often have points to contribute, but it's very hard to find space to raise my point. Yet if my direct report who is male attends in my space, he openly gets asked if he would like to raise any points. That's very frustrating.
Yeah. That's something that I can personally relate to as well. Just for the fact that I often find I'm an introvert. Most people don't think that I'm an introvert, but I am an introvert. I often present as an extrovert, so people just kind of assume, like, oh, you must be an extrovert. I'm like, no, I'm actually an introvert. And when it comes to those types of meetings, I do struggle to find, like, where am I supposed to jump in here? And that's more from a logistical perspective of, like, where, you know, looking for the opportunity, looking for the gap in the conversation without speaking over someone, without feeling like I'm kind of jumping in and taking over or something like that. That the issue raised doesn't sound like it's directly related to imposter syndrome, but it's equally frustrating because, like, I have been in that situation before, and it's about men being aware of these issues. They might not even be aware. It might not be a deliberate thing. It's just they are asking people who are like them. This guy is like me, therefore I'm going to ask him his opinion. And men need to become aware of it, and they need to start passing the mic. It's called passing the mic in meetings, to make sure everyone has a share of voice. Now, what you could do to manage that is to raise it with the organizer of the meeting. And that could be something simple like joining a couple of minutes early. If it's a Zoom, when we go back in person, it's having a quick word, or arriving early and say, listen, I have a really interesting idea that I'd love to share in the meeting, and letting people know that you have something to share so that they will invite you to speak. I know it's extremely frustrating. It's and I don't want to be like, oh, it is the way it is. It is the way it is, but we can change it. We can manage it. But you need to let people know what's going on.
Okay, great advice there, Aoife. Listen, I'll go back to you then for your last few bits, because I just want to wrap it up at the hour.
Yeah, and if anyone has any specific questions, absolutely feel free to reach out to me. I am about to share my details. I shared some contact details at the start. I will be sharing some more now at the end. So let me just put that back. So we've had our questions. So the final thought I want to leave you with is fake it till you make it. I want you to get rid of fake it till you make it, because that makes it sound like you're a total fraud and that you're a fake. And I want you to flip the script to believe and you will achieve. So no more fake it till you make it. Believe and you will achieve. If you want to connect with me, you will find more additional details on the website impostersyndrome.ie. I share these at the start. They also have links, and I'm happy to share the deck with anyone who would like to share it. And I can send it to you, Karen, if you want to send it on to attendees as well. Happy to share. The Happier at Work podcast, which Karen mentioned, but I think I completely forgot to mention when I was talking about my business. But the Happier at Work podcast, it's got about 21,000 listens now at the moment. It's been running since August 2019. Lots of a back catalogue of various topics on leadership, women's empowerment, diversity and inclusion, the future of work, especially in the pandemic. And yeah, so lots of interesting topics there, even if I'm slightly biased about it. I also have a quiz, and the quiz, I mean, it's a just for fun quiz rather than being a really scientific, researchy based quiz, which I'm a little bit more into, but this is a just for fun quiz, and it's what kind of imposter are you, and the link is there on the slides. And if you go to impostersyndrome.ie and sign up, you will actually get access to the From Imposter to Empowered, and that is like a step-by-step process using the ABC method and that I had mentioned as well. So yeah, I mean, that's it from me. If anyone has any questions, absolutely feel free to reach out directly to me. My website is happieratwork.ie, but you'll also find more information on imposter syndrome at impostersyndrome.ie.
That's absolutely brilliant, Aoife. Thank you so much.
And that takes us, I think, just just at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, well done, well done. Listen, thank you again for your time and your energy, and for all of that information-packed presentation that you gave us there. Absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much, Aoife O'Brien.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for your participation. Thanks for sharing your questions and your thoughts as well. So really appreciate that. And thank you, Karen, for inviting me. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.